Your pleasure, huh? You forgot that I was even going to speak. All right. Feels like home being back. I and I think the point that drove it, that drove that point home to me just a minute ago was Commissioner Horrocks saying, you traitor, we just started to like you. And I said to him, no, you just stopped disliking me. I was working towards you liking me, Brad. But for those that don't know the dynamics, is I represent the Uintah Basin in Congress, and I will always feel like I represent the Uintah Basin in Congress. This place was somewhere that I immediately connected with during my first election, and as the redistricting happened, I ultimately lost this part. I traded you all for the liberal avenues of Salt Lake, so that's going to be fun. But I have a great love and respect for what goes on in this basin, in these counties out here. As our population trend across the nation urbanizes and we lose more rural population, we have to make sure that you have an outsized voice of the importance of what you do and what it impacts. You may have fewer people, and they may be moving more to the Wasatch Front, and I can't stop that, right? Like these things are trends. But what you can do is maybe this is only 10% of the population in a particular district, and during the pandemic and when the boom and bust cycle had hit really hard, it always felt like we needed to put a little more time into it, right? There are things that representatives need to focus on, and this is at the state or the federal level, where you don't necessarily put the amount of effort into a congruent amount of population. What we do in rural Utah has an outsized effect on our ability to eat, our ability to travel, the things that we take for granted as city slickers. And I can speak to that, having always lived on the Wasatch Front. All my time in Utah, I've lived between Ogden, Davis County, and Salt Lake, and the importance isn't omnipresent to everybody, isn't on the forefront of everybody's minds. But in representation, it's important to do that. I know you have that at the state level, and I tried to do that at the federal level, and our senators also focus on that. Let me also give a thank you, and I'm glad that I got to kind of go right after the rail project, because people ask me all the time, hey, how is it back there? I've been in Congress for 18 months, and they're always, how is it back there? And my simple question is, well, have you seen the news in the last 18 months? That's how it is. Working on the Uintah Basin rail project scratched my itch of being productive. I came from a consulting world, private sector, and then to go into the government sector, I wasn't expecting so much just bureau. I knew it was there, but I wasn't expecting it to wear on me as much as it was to see the painful bureaucracy. But to be able to be a part of a project like this, where even though it's been slow and it shouldn't have been, to be able to see the momentum has been huge, and it's been something that I've very much appreciated working on. My role seemed to mostly gravitate towards one of those line items that Greg talked about in the Army Corps of Engineers. And I want all of you stakeholders to know that our office put an outsized effort into building relationship, communicating things properly, being respectful, and ultimately it paid off. We got that portion of it through. There's still going to be hiccups, and that's kind of what I'm going to lead to with this. The main point of my message today is that these hiccups, they're a lot bigger than that, and it's really, really frustrating to see it play out, and that's the goal of what you're seeing with some of the legislative work that we're doing. So let me actually just jump right into that. A lot can be said about our energy policy over the last 18 months. When President Biden instituted the secretarial order and canceled the Keystone Pipeline, those were the two big items that everybody keyed on. They're easy to criticize. I have been on the record having been critical of them since the day he announced them. And But what people don't necessarily see is what takes place with the rail project. There's a plan, there's certifications you have to do, there's approvals that you need, and the delay tactics that can exist are some of the most, you don't legislate them, you can't fix it on the House floor. This is the bureaucratic play that takes place. And seeing that, you can still see President Biden's administration say, no, we're approving leases, we're approving, we've got the permits out there, our production is at almost at 2019 levels, and there's more demand now, and there's always a little bit of truth to all of this, but what is not as obvious and apparent to folks is how things are getting delayed. And as you look through, and I won't go through each piece of legislation, and I'm going to give this is an example of what we're doing on the House Natural Resources Committee. Obviously listed from handsome to not down there with Rosendale. You can tell him I said that. These are 6 key pieces of legislation that we are trying to run with. We do not believe that Representative Grijalva is going to put these up for committee vote, but taking the majority this fall, we have these things ready to go. And every one of these pieces of legislation is targeting that. Mine in particular, the Energy Independence Act. It simply says, look, you've got a 30-day window. Once the environmental review is done, you've got 30 days. 30 days to approve this. And it also has a couple other key reporting factors to create that transparency that's needed into understanding where is this in the process of the permit? Where is this in the lease in the process? Doing that is the key thing that government should do with respect to industry, is provide the framework for you all in the private sector to go and accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. That's one of the biggest frustrations that I've seen in Congress right now, is all we need to be doing is to have the regulatory environment that is clear, transparent, and it exists so you all can adhere to it. I've never heard a single one of these companies saying they're not going to adhere to an environmental review. They're going to do what is required of them. They just want to be able to know what to expect. And if this is constantly in flux, and these bureaucratic administrative actions that can be taken in a delay tactic or moved down, where like, yeah, it's been approved, but then there's another wrinkle, and then a few months goes by. I understand how difficult that is for the CEOs of these companies and these sponsors. But you just need an environment in which to work. You are willing to adhere to what you're supposed to adhere to and to the system. But when it's extra wrinkles, and I keep using that term because that's what it is. It is not official. They just continue to be these delay tactics that make it so difficult for our industry to thrive. And that's what we're trying to target with this. So this is the main approach that you're seeing from the Natural Resources Committee. And I'll speak to, just in general, the 2 main committees that are dealing with all things related to American energy independence, which is the Energy and Commerce Committee, which my colleague, Representative John Curtis, who now will be more involved here as the redistricting lines have shaped for this 3rd congressional district to incorporate all of the Uintah Basin. The Energy and Commerce Committee is vital to this industry, and it's actually considered it's the preeminent, foremost, most important aspect of this. I am preaching to the choir here. You all understand that, but it's been very important to have John Curtis's voice in a couple aspects, but particularly creating an avenue for Republicans to talk about climate. Because as I came into this world, and I would go and meet with Ricky, and she would take me to some of the locations out here at Mighton, and I remember thinking, okay, so how am I going to talk about energy and climate at the same time? I obviously get it. I can understand what's going on in the world today, but coming into the world of politics, which I was new to, how am I going to embrace this? Folks, that's been the easiest part. Why? Because every time I go to a site visit, in the energy industry, mining, energy, natural gas, whatever. The first people you put me in contact with are your environmental review folks. What are we doing to reduce emissions? What are we? So I'm like, well, if industry is already there, and then why is it so hard sometimes for Republicans to talk about it? And that's the thing that I've appreciated with Representative Curtis is he and Garrett Graves, who's up on this list, they sort of bloodied themselves through the wall to get Republicans more on board with talking about it. And what does that ultimately lead to? The justification that Americans need to be leading in this industry. And I've been very grateful for his effort on those matters. And when he takes his cues from industry, and I, along with him and many of the others in Congress right now, particularly from our two committees, Energy and Commerce and Natural Resources, really appreciate your focus on this because it gives us all the ammo we need to be able to talk about how a strategy should be developed and why we should be bolstering and supporting this industry instead of going away from it, creating these tactics that will, scare investors away from coming. I'm sure at this two-day conference, someone's going to talk about ESG, so I won't go on with that one. I think I saw Marlo Oaks on the schedule. But you scare away investors, it makes your job harder, and we have a net loss. We will lose this to other countries instead of leading the way that our nation should be leading. And that's essentially my big message, is that you all have created an opportunity for us as members of Congress to be able to speak to this in a credible way, justify the work that we've done, that we're doing, and that we need to continue to do, and it's extremely appreciated from those of us. So please continue to double down on your efforts, continue to share what it is that you're doing on this front, and as the political and politically, if things shape up the way that there are many that are predicting, Republicans were to take the House back, we can get some of this stuff done. To the extent that we can completely change President Biden's administration and his veto pen, I can't predict that right now. But what I can predict is that we're going to have to govern when we get in the majority, and we're going to put a lot of this stuff and demand that we do this. Because there is no reason to put this on the backs of American people. You are one of the most responsible industries that I've ever experienced. You're thoughtful, you're forward-thinking, and you're going to help us avoid what Europe just went through, where they thought, well, we can't frack because it looks bad. Well, we're going to buy fracking gas from Russia. Oh, then there's a war, and now we got to restart our coal plants because they're not willing to engage and do other things. Like, we're not going to get there. And I want to be a part of making sure that we take a very strong strategic approach that bolsters what you all are doing, and it does the responsible thing. And that's some of the main efforts that we're trying to do there. And legislation like this, work on the Energy, Climate, and Conservation Caucus, or task force that McCarthy put John Curtis and I on, that's led by Garrett Graves. Like, we're highly focused on this, and we're working hand in hand with industry to make sure that we can do that. Again, about productivity, go to the next slide here, and I'll just end my remarks with just I'm not gonna belabor this point, but when you want to talk about how ridiculous it is to make it the harshest environment in the world for the energy industry to thrive, just look at all of the companies on this slide. I had my team just say, hey, look, go after everything. Think of everything we possibly can. The slide's not big enough, and I'm not going to do more than 2 slides, I promise. I can commit to that. Now that I'm no longer a consultant, I hope to never do more than 2 slides. Every single industry is covered here. They even added like Snickers and the candy that I like the most. I mean, look at that page. You've got obviously some obvious ones that are going to use petroleum products. But some of the things that I like to particularly highlight is how much in the outdoor industry is important. Clothing brands, even the old, we even making sure we put Patagonia up here. This is what lawmakers aren't thinking about. They're not always thinking about the externalities because it doesn't fit a narrative. It doesn't fit those cable news talking points. They want to badmouth the other side. They don't think about all the broad implications that your industry creates, and how much, and the widespread nature that comes from this. Now, the reason that Travis and I thought about this sort of topic to just highlight, and again, I'm not going to dig deep in this, and I think my time's probably close to being done, is we went to Lifetime Products in Clearfield. We went and we're touring their site, their manufacturing site. And the CEO just naturally talked about it. He's like, look, with this kind of this war on energy, like the prices that are going to create for us to build a kayak. The kayak does not, emit a lot of carbon, and a lot of, environmentalists love kayaks. That's the nature of just how ridiculous it is to go away from making sure that this industry has what it needs to thrive, do it better than any other nation, which you have proven that you're willing to do, so we can make sure that we have strong national security, that we're affordable, and that we are forward-thinking. And that's everything that I've seen from this industry, and it's something that I very much appreciate. So I just wanted to kind of highlight and call to your attention, just a whole bunch of implications that it has by making energy not affordable in our nation. So this is going to be a heavy focus for Republicans when we win the majority. The work that many of us are doing to ensure we're talking about it the way that you all want us to talk about it in an environmentally forward-thinking way is our motivation. That is why we want to be a part of it's why I was thrilled to be put on the task force with respect to energy and climate and conservation, because I know, and particularly with how I've interacted with those of you in Utah, I know that matters to you all, and it's something that we want to drive forward and can kind of keep that voice going back in Washington. And you will see these pieces of legislation. You will see those in the Energy and Commerce lead on this topic, and I just encourage you to continue to interact with us and bring your ideas and your justifications and your thoughts on how to go about doing it. I'm thrilled, again, to be involved in something like the rail project that was a bastion of productivity for me in a world of a lot of nonsense back in Washington. I will continue to find ways to kind of cut through that nonsense and work on things that matter to Utahns, and this is kind of been a bright, there's a bright light shine. There's been shined on this industry, and I just want you to know that the work that you're doing has been appreciated, and we will carry that message in every capacity that we can. So thank you very much.